Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where I meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena Gothberg. Hello, Shipping Podcast lovers. Finally, it's Shipping Podcast Friday again. Every other Friday, I release a new episode, and this is number 83. M Hanevold-Sandvik is a senior lawyer at Wikborg Rein&nbsp, which is a famous law firm in Oslo. I met Nina on October the 23rd, 2017. She's number 5 in the series of 10 Women to Watch for the Future. And we have a very nice conversation about everything in shipping, I would say. Nina is also sharing that she was a maritime trainee in the Norwegian Shipowners Association's Maritime Trainee Program. If you want to know more about that, you can go back to episode 81 and listen to my interview with Tom Kleppesto, who was the mastermind behind that program when it started. We speak about role models and how important it is to start early in your career to build your networks. I think that is so important. So listen up. This is our chat. Welcome to the Shipping Podcast. Could you please introduce yourself?
My name is M Hanevold-Sandvik, and I'm a senior lawyer in the Norwegian law firm Wikborg Rein.
How did you come in contact with shipping?
Originally, I wanted to be a diplomat like my father, so I started studying international law. And as I was taking my master's degree at New York University, I happened to take Admiralty or Maritime Law as one of the courses, and I realized that it was very international. It was based on international law, international conventions, but it was much more practical than public international law. So I decided that I would give shipping a shot, and also because Norway has long traditions with the shipping industry. So I thought this was the way to go, and I tried it and stuck with it.
So did you start to work as a lawyer at once after you graduated? Or?
Yeah, so I started working as an associate at Wikborg Rein when I graduated from the University of Oslo, where I also have a degree from. And when I started working, I also got the opportunity to participate in the Maritime Trainee Program, which is a management trainee program that the Norwegian Shipowners Association has. And Wikborg Rein has participated along with a number of other companies in the shipping industry. So it's a program where graduates of law, economics, and civil engineering get to participate, and it's sort of a kickstart into the maritime industry. So I did that at the same time as working for Wikborg Rein.
How long is that program?
It's a 2-year program, or now it's going to be a year and a half. They've just changed the format a little bit, but it used to be 6 modules during those 2 years. It was a week at a time where we met up and had 4 modules in Norway, various places in Norway that have a strong link to the shipping industry. And then also we went to Singapore and to London. That was sort of part of the program, but then at the same time, I worked as a normal associate in the shipping offshore department at Wikborg Rein, while the other trainees worked in their various companies. And in the other companies, because they're only shipping related, so then the trainees would work in different departments. But in a law firm, of course, the other departments we have are not related to shipping, so I just worked in the shipping offshore department.
So how many people are in a group like that?
Well, I was in the financial crisis group, as it was called, because it started up in 2010. So we were 14, 15 people. At the most, the group a couple of years before us were 32. So it varies a bit depending on how the market is at the time. And some of the groups after me were 20 people and half of them were engineers, because it was all the offshore companies were recruiting through this program. But now I saw that the new group that's starting up next year is so far there's not a single offshore related company participating. So
it goes with the times.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. So what do you do today in your work? What's your everyday work?
I specialize in marine casualties and litigation, various types of litigation, but mainly related to marine casualties. So I'm a member of what we call our emergency response team. So if a marine casualty happens, then usually the P&I insurers, sometimes also the hull machinery insurers, will contact us and ask us to go out to where the crew is or where the vessel is, depending on if it's possible to board the vessel or not, and ask us to investigate the incident. So what we do is we speak to the crew members, we write down statements of their account of what has happened, and also we collect documents that might be relevant at a later stage if questions of liability, for example, arises. And then sometimes, depending on what's happened, it might be a question of salvage, negotiate a salvage contract or wreck removal contracts. And then, as time goes on, questions might arise that lead to litigation. And then I litigate before the Norwegian courts because I'm a Norwegian qualified lawyer.
So at the beginning, it's you and a mobile phone out there?
Pretty much, yeah. And a laptop. It's very important to have a good laptop with you. But we try to go as a team, usually, depending on the size of the incident. But we usually would prefer to go a bigger team in the beginning and then scale down as soon as we see what's necessary. Because it's unfortunate if there's just one of you there at the beginning and then, there's all kinds of things happening at the same time. The police might be there wanting to interview crew members or the accident investigation board. And there's lots of things going on board the ship. And so it's helpful to be more than just one person because you can't be everywhere at once.
So your clients is the ship owners?
Our clients are usually the ship owners and insurers because the insurers have in their insurance terms the right to appoint lawyers. And because there's usually no interest conflict between the insurers and the ship owners. So we represent both. But we rarely represent the cargo interest, for example. There are other law firms that tend to represent those interests, but we're usually on the P&I insurer, hull machinery insurer side.
So you're traveling a lot?
Sometimes. I find it quite exciting to travel. So, for example, I've did a shipboard investigation in Mexico, which I found very interesting. But I've also been various places along the Norwegian coast, places I never thought I would visit. So it's definitely interesting. You get to see various parts of the world.
You were one of the 10 women to watch for the future on that list that Young Ship set up. What did you feel when you found out?
I was quite excited, to be honest. I thought it was a huge honor. Of course, it was the first time that they had a list like this. So I knew that they were going to put it together, but I never dreamt that I would be on it. And yeah, a huge honor.
Do you think they will do it again?
I hope so. I certainly do. And I think they should, because I think there's lots of other women who deserve to be recognized. And if they do it again, I'll send in my nominations for other people I know should be on the list.
Because I think it means something. It makes women more visible.
I agree. And I think it's important in our industry to recognize the women who are interested in developing their careers in the industry. And
also they got so much to contribute.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting to see the women on the list because it's quite diverse. I have to say I didn't know most of them before. I've now talked to more of them, but it's because we represent so different parts of the industry. And so that's very interesting and fun to see that women are, contributing in all parts of the industry. And of course, I come from more of a legal background, and I think in law firms we have a challenge that's, it's sort of dual challenge. It's the challenge of being a woman in shipping, but it's also difficult for women in law firm, as most women tend to quit after a few years in law firms. It gets a bit too difficult to juggle family life and a career. And so I think it's it's very encouraging to see also Christine from Wiersholm, who is also on the list, and she's a partner in a law firm, which I also find, just looking at her, it's very encouraging to see that it is possible also in the legal industry. And I hope that other women look at me also and see that I've now worked 8 years in a law firm, and it's possible to stay and to feel that it's challenging and fun, and I hope to continue to work in a law firm. So.
Did you have a role model when you grew up?
Yes and no. It definitely wasn't a shipping related one, because as I mentioned at the start, I wanted to be a diplomat, which my father worked as a diplomat. So I think I looked at what he did and the opportunities he got to do as we moved around and lived in different countries. And I thought it seemed important to be able to contribute to that dialogue between different countries. So I looked up to him in a way. Of course, his career was very different from what I do now. And I think now I'm trying to search for role models more in our industry. And there aren't that many women who have sort of more experience in the shipping industry. But I think, especially after I joined Vista in Norway, I see that there are many women who I find get motivated by speaking to them. So I found that very helpful for finding new role models.
Yeah, I've been a member of Vista since the year 2000.
Yeah.
And I always say that I learn the most about shipping when I go to Vista meetings. Because it's that informal thing that you talk about and you can ask the questions you can't really ask otherwise. Yeah. And we talk about things. Because sometimes men ask me, why do we need a female organization in 2017? Well, it's different.
Yeah. And it's just sometimes you need to see somebody who's a little bit more like yourself to see that it's possible. And it doesn't have to be someone who does exactly the same thing as yourself. It's just to see that, you can excel in the industry. For example, I know Helle Hammer, who works at Seafood. And every time I meet her, I just get so much positive energy from her, because she's so excited and she's all over the place, working for the insurers and their interests. And I get very encouraged by meeting her and seeing what she does. And so we need more people like that.
I agree. I also get a lot of energy from male role models, but I agree with you. I agree with you.
For young people, I think it's important for them to take responsibility for developing their own careers. And I had a presentation earlier this year for Young Ship in Bergen, where I spoke about taking the opportunities that come along and build your own career. And I think many young people, they start in the shipping industry and they feel that when they're recruited, they're promised all these opportunities, and then they start working in the industry, and then they feel that they disappear a little bit. They can work at a ship-owning company with lots of employees, or they can work in a bank or, in a law firm. And I think it's important for young people to take responsibility for building their own careers. And one way of doing that is just to be vocal about what you would like to do. So, for example, I mentioned the Maritime Trainee Program that I got to participate in. When I applied for the program, I was very outspoken about this is something I wanted to participate in. This is something I wanted to do. And I think I got the spot for Wikborg Rein that year because I was the most clear on wanting that spot. And I think young people need to take charge of their own career, because if they do, they might find that they have a lot of colleagues who are willing to help them along the way. And there are a number of very interesting opportunities that you can get to explore if you just speak out and express your interest. Another example that I had was that one of my colleagues, actually the head of our emergency response team, whom when we spoke about male role models, he'd probably be my male role model. It's called Morten Lund Mathisen. He mentioned that when he started working, he took the exam for a deck officer, or at the time it was called coastal officer, and now it's called deck officer class 5. And he'd taken that course. And then he said, well, he just threw out, well, you should do that as well. And I said, yeah, sure, I'd like to do that. So when I worked for a couple of years, I ended up going for evening classes twice per week for a year. And I took the exam for deck officer class 5, which is something the firm paid for. It was an opportunity for me to get to understand more about what actually happens on a ship, because I don't have a maritime background. I'm not from a shipping family. So for me, just to be able to do a good job when we go out and interview seafarers, I need to know what I'm talking about. I need to know the law, so I need to know what type of information I need from a legal perspective, but I also need to know that I'm asking them the right questions. And so to do that, I need to understand the basics of navigation, the basics of ship stability, and so on. So this exam really helped me. And I'm sure in other types of jobs, there's similar opportunities. So you can just, somebody might mention something and you just say, yeah, I'd like to do that. Or if you have a seminar you'd like to attend, or a course, or you'd like to work at one of the international offices of your company, if you just speak out about it, you're much more likely to actually get that opportunity. And that's something I try to speak to my younger colleagues about, that nobody's going to come into your office and say, oh, would you like to work in London for a year? Or they might, but it's much more likely if you just express your interest in it. So I think that's something very important for young people to take charge of building their own careers.
And also to start growing your network when you're young.
Yeah. And I know you've spoken in some of your previous podcasts with, for example, Maritime Trainee, who's been very involved in Young Ship, and also Birgit Lioden, who, of course, has started working with Young Ship International. And I think that's a very good opportunity for younger people to start networking early on. For those of us who've been maritime trainees, I know that that's a very good way to start building your network as well, not only with the people in your own group, which is sort of like your classmates at school, we get to know each other very well and keep in touch, but also with all the other maritime trainee alumni. We have alumni dinners every year, and it's a great way to get to know other people in the industry, because you have that experience in common, even if you didn't do it in the same year. Everybody feels close connection to the program and are passionate about the industry and about that interchange between the various disciplines of law and economics and engineering.
Yeah, and also you get to meet people. As you said, shipping is a relationship business. So if you start to grow your network and you maybe practice your relationship skills, I don't know, how to meet people and how not to be afraid to speak up. I mean, when you first start, you might feel like, I am the loneliest person in this room when you go to a meeting, but you're not.
Yeah.
Just ask the next one, why did you come today? Yeah. And then you got a friend.
And speaking up, that's also makes me think of speaking opportunities. And I think it's very important to, if you're asked to speak at a conference or at just a seminar, one should always try to say yes, if possible, even though it might feel a little bit intimidating, or you feel that, I'm not really an expert in this area. I think it's important to push yourself, because that's, firstly, if you don't know a lot, then you'll prepare even more before you go. And so you will have those skills or that knowledge once you go. But also it's a great opportunity to speak to people after you've had a presentation and to hear other people's opinions. So you should always try to say yes, if possible.
You're full of good advice. I think you're right. You're spot on.
I just think I've never had a negative experience with just trying to jump on the opportunities that come. So I just want other people to do the same thing. So another example of an opportunity that I got was I'm a board member of a company called Incentra, which was, I was asked if I would be interested in joining the board of directors. And I thought, well, this is a company that it's cooperative between different Norwegian ship owners, and they basically, Incentra negotiates procurement contracts on behalf of all the members, and then they use these contracts for purchasing lube oil or personal protection equipment and so on. And when I was asked if I would be interested in joining the board of directors as an external board member, I thought, well, I'm not really an expert on procurement, but I said, yeah, sure, I'll give it a go. And I found it the most rewarding experience, because I'm getting an insight into the daily operations of ship owners in a way I never would have otherwise. And I also feel that I am contributing, because with my legal background, that has come in handy a few times. So I think I'm personally benefiting a lot and learning a lot about just the shipping industry from being on the board.
You have all jacks of trade, I think. You do many different things, and you got double exams, and you got,
Well, I like to, take the opportunities that come my way, and also make opportunities for myself.
Great. I think it's great. I think you are a role model for the younger women and men.
Well, I still feel it's a bit early, but I hope I can be.
How do you see the future of shipping in general?
Well, my work is, of course, not so closely related to the market trends in a way, because the casualties happen regardless of whether the shipping is booming or not.
Usually more when they are not booming.
That's true, but there's an increase in safety requirements, which is very positive, which means that the number of big casualties are going down. Of course, it means less work for us, but we are all, happy about that trend, because it's just because the work is interesting doesn't mean that we want the accidents to happen. And so I think it's positive that there's that we have more of these safety requirements, and that ship owners are forced to implement regardless of how the market is going, because it is a question of securing, life, environment, and property, and that's important, I think.
But what about all the new business coming up now? It's a digital transformation, and it's startups in this industry and things like that. And the environmental, the new technique that is used there, new fuel, everything is new in a way, and that might also cause casualties.
Yeah, and I think as lawyers, we're sort of fascinated by this idea of autonomous vessels, because there's so many questions of liability related to autonomous vessels. Who would be liable if something happens? If there is technical error that causes sort of a collision, who's liable? It's not as easy as when you have somebody on board making the decision. Of course, there's always somebody making the decision, but it's you get a distance if it's somebody sort of on land who's operating the vessel. So, of course, there's still a way to go before we're going to see a lot of autonomous ships in the industry. But I think already at this stage it's important to start thinking about the legal aspects of it, because we need to have a legal framework in place before the ships can actually start operating.
I've been talking to some insurers, and I have asked them, when does the new scrubber or whatever it is become part of the ship? So it can be insured, because there is a difference there. And also, what's the liability of the maker, and when does that transfer onto the ship? And they are not that keen to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes it's best to wait until you actually have a situation where you see where liability is attributed, if you're an insurer. But these are difficult questions. And I'm not going to provide an answer either.
No, I didn't. No, but I mean, it's interesting, and I think we need to think about it beforehand, and not just sit there and wait for it to just dawn on us.
Yeah.
I don't have the answers. I'm just, because I mean, I used to work in the insurance business, and that is why I think like that. Probably no one else thinks like that, because it's technical developments and new things, and everyone is excited and so on. Yeah, but what about the legal framework?
Yeah. And I think it's also important you need to have, for example, with the Ballast Water Convention, of course it's important work, but it also you need to have a combination of the legal framework where it actually works with what you can do in practice and what's possible from more of a sort of marine biology perspective. Because, for example, how are you going to see if the microorganisms are at a sufficiently low number? You need to do testing to see that the convention is upheld, but it's not that easy to do testing because these are live organisms, and of course they die. So if there's a lapse between the time when the sample is taken and the testing is made, then that can implement the results, and so sometimes it's easier also to make the legal framework than to see how it works in practice.
Yeah. The shipping industry is often looked upon as the Cinderella industry. No one knows about us. What can we do about that?
Actually, I think from where I'm coming from, I don't feel that that's the case because, of course, I'm in Norway. Everybody knows about shipping in Norway. And also, I'm lucky to work in an area where it's easy for us to recruit, actually, because maritime law is one of the very few areas of law where it's possible to work internationally. Otherwise, when you work with law, you're very tied to your own jurisdiction. And so for us, we're sort of, or the way to work internationally. And so I feel in Norway, many people want to work in the shipping industry. And with graduates, for example, from the university, many of them do want to work with maritime law because young people today have a much more international perspective. Many people want to work abroad. And then, if you work with real estate or these issues, then you're going to be stuck in your own jurisdiction. So we don't actually have that visibility problem. I understand that it's different abroad. For example, we have an office in London. So I've spoken to some of my colleagues at the London office, and they say in England, maritime law is just not that exciting. Well, in Norway, I think it has this link to more of our adventurous side and all the explorers and the shipping traditions. And so the shipping industry is viewed as something exciting to be part of. But in England, of course, they have long traditions, and especially maritime law, where English law is the type of law that everybody looks to. But still, it's just so small compared to everything else that they do. So what to do to be more visible? I'm not quite sure. I think you'd have to ask somebody who works in a different country, really. Because we're doing quite well.
I think, we need the next generation.
Yeah.
We need the most bright talent there is, because we are going to develop this industry into even more cool industry. And then we need the support of politicians.
Yeah.
I see that in Norway, your government is talking about maritime industry now and then. I can see them on television in Sweden. They are talking about the maritime industry, but that's not the case all over the world.
No.
And the politicians are the ones who are taking decisions for our industry. And they are sending representatives to IMO, and they are, and if they don't know about us, they can come with all sorts of decisions and propositions and whatever. So in a way, I think my view is that we need to get a better picture of what we do and what we contribute with. I live in a country with the longest coastline in the European Union. Yeah. We never, in our country, in Sweden, people don't talk about the maritime industry. They don't know about it.
Yeah.
We got one bridge to EU, and that's between Denmark and Sweden. So it has to be transport on keel.
I think tradition is really, important here. It's the countries that have a long tradition with the maritime industry are continuing to develop as maritime nations, and are, even Norway, where everything is expensive to run out of Norway, but we're still doing well because there is interest in the industry and there's innovation. But I'm not sure how other countries that don't have really the same traditions. And yes, Sweden has a long coastal border, but it does have that sort of narrow channel out from past Denmark to get out. It's not really. I think the countries that have more access to sea people have a closer relationship to the sea. If, for example, in Norway, I think. So I don't really have a good answer for you here.
Okay. Who would you be curious to listen to in a shipping podcast? Who do you think I should meet the next? Well,
I mentioned Helle Hammer earlier. I think you should speak to her. I'm sure she has a lot to contribute. And she, of course, has been involved with politics before. So she could probably answer your question about visibility. And I think she has a lot of experience, which is more interesting to listen to.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you for your time. Thank you for speaking to me.
Thank you for speaking to me.
Thank you, Nina. I think we had a great conversation. In the last episode, I asked you if you were tired of listening to me or if you wanted more of what I'm doing. And some of you are actually giving me feedback, which I love. It's so much easier for me if I get your feedback. And Captain Alison Tunick, I hope I pronounced that correct, at the Main Maritime Academy, wrote to hello@shippingpodcast.com and answered my question. I would read it to you. I just listened to your 82nd episode while on my morning commute to work, and I want to send you a resounding yes, please, for more of your podcast beyond episode 100. I love listening to your podcast. I teach in the Maritime Transportation Department at Maine Maritime Academy, and I often assign listening to your podcast as homework. Oh my God! I think you provide an invaluable service to people both inside and outside the industry. Thank you very much for that. Especially for my students, who wonder why they are working towards licenses to drive ships when they see the looming onset of autonomous ships. It's extremely helpful for me to point to your podcast episodes to reiterate that there are many, many different career choices in the shipping industry. Thank you for your services, and please continue if you're able to. Well, that almost brought tears into my eyes. Who can resist an email like that? I usually answer every feedback that I get, but I haven't had time lately. I've been swamped with work. So I thought maybe I should do a shout out instead. Here is another one. My name is Marie-Christine, and I recently started working for the Marketing and Communications Department for OSM Maritime Group. Your podcast is my go-to place to learn more about the maritime industry, and I love listening to your podcast. I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge, experience, and your network with the world. This is so far away from my own personality. I feel so embarrassed by reading these emails, but I got that advice from a young fan of the podcast who will be helping me out with my marketing. So I better do what he says, otherwise maybe he won't help. I don't know. So the last one I'm reading this time, it's from Rick Gallagher. I am just a consumer of goods shipped by sea, no real ties to the industry. But I had a 6-hour drive yesterday, so I was able to clear a backlog of your podcast. I hear that you're trying to expand and do new things. But I really like the music, so not all change is positive. The music is as unique as you are, and is your brand. No reason to change, in my opinion. If you just knew how many friends I make and how many interesting people that I meet that I wouldn't have met if I didn't start the shipping podcast. It's growing and I enjoy it so much. I think maybe it's just a little bit overwhelming at the moment. So many things I want to do and so little time, and definitely not a budget to do all the things I want to do. So if you want to help me out, if you want to support what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to open up the channel of audio to people within the shipping industry, but also outside. Then you can go to patreon.com/shippingpodcast and you can support me monetarily, or you could just send me an email to hello@shippingpodcast.com and I will be ever so thankful. This is so much fun. If you want to start your own podcast, please let me know. I think I know all the ropes now. I've been doing this for 2.5 years, and it's an industry as hidden as the shipping industry, I promise you. It's a matter of finding the right people. I want this podcast to get into the ears, hearts, and souls of people. Help me with that. Get people to subscribe to the shipping podcast and spread the word. I think we are onto something. That's all for now. From me to you, over and out. Thank you for listening to the shipping podcast. Don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a shipping podcast available and that they should download it and listen to the maritime professionals who are sharing their passion for the shipping industry.